I'm so glad you found your way here, right now, while you rest. Your sleeping brain is quietly doing something that therapists spend years trying to help you do while awake. You'll discover how your subconscious dismantles painful memories each night, and understand why sleep is the most generous healer you've never thanked.
Welcome to Psychology for Sleep.
Now settle in. Your body is already softening. Your breathing beginning to slow. Let your mind release its grip on the day, because tonight, the science itself will carry you. We'll journey through 100 psychology facts about trauma, dreams, and the sleeping brain, from the hidden chemistry of emotional healing, to the architecture of nightmares that protect you, to the quiet mercy your mind offers every single night. Feel your breath, and know this: every mind carrying something heavy tonight is already beginning, without effort or trying, the patient work of healing. Every night, while you sleep, your brain does something that no waking therapy can fully replicate. During REM sleep, the stage marked by rapid eye movement and vivid dreaming, your brain systematically revisits emotional memories, but strips away the sharp edges of the stress chemicals attached to them. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley describe this as sleep therapy, a nightly process where the brain reconsolidates memories in a lower stress neurochemical environment. The result, over time, is that the same memory becomes less sharp, less raw, less able to pull you under. This is not forgetting, it is healing. The chemical responsible for much of this nightly repair is called norepinephrine. During waking hours, norepinephrine floods your system during moments of fear, stress, and pain. It's the molecule that makes a bad memory feel pressing and unrelenting. But during REM sleep, the brain does something extraordinary. Norepinephrine production drops to nearly zero. This creates a window, a chemical quiet, in which your brain can safely replay emotional memories without re-traumatizing you. Matthew Walker, a neuroscientist at UC Berkeley, calls this the brain's overnight therapy function. Without that nightly chemical reprieve, traumatic memories remain sealed tight in their original, unprocessed intensity. The amygdala is a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your brain, and it is the seat of your fear responses. During waking life, when you recall something painful, your amygdala fires intensely, recreating the emotional charge of the original experience. But during REM sleep, studies using functional MRI imaging show that the amygdala, though active, is modulated differently. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, calming part of your brain, maintains a quiet dialogue with the amygdala during dreams. This partnership allows emotionally intense memories to be processed without triggering the full cascade of fear and panic that would occur if you were awake. Your brain keeps memories in two forms, simultaneously: the factual content, what happened, and the emotional tone, how it felt. Sleep, particularly REM sleep, works specifically on the emotional tone. Researchers call this process memory reconsolidation, and it happens in cycles across the night. Each REM period, which grows longer as the night progresses, gives your brain another pass at softening the emotional charge of difficult memories. This is why people who sleep well after a difficult experience often find the memory less painful by morning, not because they've forgotten anything, but because the emotional intensity has been quietly, carefully turned down. Dreams are not random noise. According to the threat simulation theory, developed by Finnish neuroscientist Antti Revonsuo, dreaming evolved specifically to allow the brain to rehearse and process threatening experiences in a safe environment. During a dream, your body is physically paralyzed, a state called REM atonia, while your mind runs through emotionally charged scenarios. This paralysis prevents you from physically acting out your dreams, but it also means your nervous system can experience intense emotional content, including fear and grief and anger, without the full cortisol and adrenaline response that would accompany those feelings in waking life. Dreams are the brain's protected rehearsal space. Sleep deprivation measurably worsens emotional processing. Studies at the University of California, Berkeley found that people who were kept awake for one night showed amygdala reactivity up to 60% higher than people who had slept normally. The sleep-deprived brain loses the ability to distinguish between threatening and non-threatening stimuli. Everything begins to feel overwhelming and unmanageable. This is the neurological reason why everything feels harder after a bad night's sleep. Your brain, without that nightly emotional reset, is running on a threat detection system with no off switch. Rest doesn't just reduce fatigue. It restores the brain's ability to perceive the world accurately. Post-traumatic stress disorder, known as PTSD, is now understood partly as a disorder of sleep and memory reconsolidation. People with PTSD often experience REM sleep disruption. Their brains attempt to process traumatic memories during dreams. But the norepinephrine suppression that normally occurs during REM fails to happen completely. The result is that traumatic memories are replayed in dreams with their full, unprocessed emotional charge intact. This is why nightmares in PTSD are not simply bad dreams. They are memories that couldn't complete the healing cycle. Sleep research is now at the center of new trauma treatment models precisely because of this understanding. There is a specific brainwave pattern associated with emotional memory processing during sleep, called theta waves. Theta waves oscillate at 4 to 8 cycles per second, and they are most prominent during REM sleep and during moments of deep emotional processing while awake. Meditation, creative flow, and the edge of sleep. Researchers believe theta waves act as a carrier frequency that synchronizes different brain regions during memory reconsolidation. When the hippocampus and amygdala are communicating in theta, memories are being reshaped. Some sleep researchers describe this rhythm as the brain's editing signal, the quiet hum beneath the surface of every healing dream. The hippocampus is the brain region most associated with memory formation, but it also plays a central role in emotional memory processing during sleep. During the day, the hippocampus encodes new experiences rapidly, marking them with emotional tags from the amygdala. During slow-wave deep sleep, the hippocampus replays these memories to the cortex for longer-term storage. During subsequent REM sleep, this cortical memory is then further processed through the emotional lens. The sequence: hippocampal encoding, slow-wave replay, REM, emotional processing, is now understood as the standard 3-stage architecture of how the brain converts raw experience into integrated, emotionally manageable memory. The glymphatic system, a waste clearance network in the brain, becomes highly active during sleep. And some researchers believe its function extends beyond removing toxins to include clearing the molecular residue of emotional stress. During waking hours, inflammatory proteins and cortisol metabolites accumulate in brain tissue. Sleep, particularly deep slow-wave sleep, markedly accelerates their clearance. This system was first described in a 2013 study, and human evidence is still building. But the connection between sleep's physical cleaning function and its emotional reset function is an active and growing area of research. The brain is not simply resting during sleep. It is washing itself clean. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, follows a natural daily rhythm called a circadian pattern. It peaks sharply in the early morning, designed to help you wake and engage with the day, and should be at its lowest in the evening and during the night. When you are chronically stressed or sleep-deprived, this cortisol rhythm becomes disrupted. Elevated nighttime cortisol interferes directly with REM sleep, suppressing the emotional processing cycle. Researchers have documented that people with disrupted cortisol rhythms show slower emotional recovery from negative experiences and accumulate emotional distress over time rather than processing it nightly. Sleep is the regulator that keeps the stress system calibrated. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that floods the brain during REM sleep, and it is one of the key chemical drivers of the emotional processing cycle. High acetylcholine levels are associated with vivid dreaming, emotional memory activation, and the theta wave rhythms that underlie memory reconsolidation. During waking life, acetylcholine supports attention and learning. During REM sleep, it shifts its role, supporting the reactivation and emotional reprocessing of what was learned and experienced during the day. Some researchers describe acetylcholine as the chemical that keeps the healing dream alive long enough for the brain to do its work. Without it, the nightly editing of emotional experience would simply not occur. Research from the Max Planck Institute and collaborating labs has found that targeted memory reactivation, gently cueing specific memories during sleep, can enhance emotional processing of those memories. In early studies, participants who learned emotionally charged material and then had those memories subtly cued during slow-wave sleep showed reduced emotional reactivity to that material the following day, compared to those whose memories were not cued. The implication is quietly profound. The brain is not a passive processor during sleep. It is responsive, organized, and doing something that resembles deliberate therapeutic work. A kind of self-directed healing that requires only the simple permission to rest. The structure of a full night's sleep is not uniform. Sleep cycles of approximately 90 minutes repeat across the night, with each cycle containing both slow-wave deep sleep and a period of REM. Crucially, the proportion of these stages shifts across the night. Early cycles contain more deep sleep, while later cycles contain more and longer REM. This means that emotional processing is weighted toward the second half of the night. The hours most often sacrificed when people cut their sleep short. Waking at 5 in the morning after falling asleep at midnight means losing the sleep most responsible for emotional recovery. The math of healing sleep is specific. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, known as EMDR, is a therapy that was originally developed as a clinical tool for treating PTSD, and it works by having patients recall traumatic memories while moving their eyes back and forth following a therapist's finger. What researchers discovered over subsequent decades is that the bilateral eye movement pattern in EMDR closely resembles the eye movement patterns of natural REM sleep. The leading hypothesis is that EMDR works partly because it induces a waking state that mimics REM's emotional processing mode. The therapy essentially asks the brain to do consciously what it already does every night: process painful memories in a lower stress neurological window. The brain does not treat all memories equally during sleep. Memories with high emotional salience, things that surprised you, frightened you, moved you, or confused you, are preferentially flagged by the hippocampus for nighttime processing. This selectivity serves an adaptive purpose. The experiences most likely to affect your future behavior are the ones your brain prioritizes for integration. In healthy sleep, the emotional intensity of these flagged memories is progressively softened across repeated REM cycles. In people with sleep disorders, this prioritization system can become overwhelmed, producing vivid, distressing dreams as the brain attempts to process a backlog of emotionally charged material that hasn't been properly resolved. A 2019 study published in Nature Human Behavior found that simply sleeping between a learning session and a recall session significantly reduced the emotional response to negative memories. Participants viewed emotionally negative images, either slept or stayed awake for a period, then recalled those images. The sleep group showed significantly lower amygdala reactivity during recall and rated the images as less unpleasant than the wake group. Despite remembering the images just as accurately, the content of the memory remained intact. Only the emotional sharpness was reduced. Sleep had quietly turned down the volume on the pain without erasing the lesson. Nightmares, for all their distress, are now understood to have a functional role in emotional processing. According to research published in 2022 in the journal Current Biology, nightmare activity in the brain activates similar regions to those involved in fear regulation during waking life, particularly the insula, the cingulate cortex, and the amygdala. People who experience nightmare content involving fear show reduced fear responses during waking hours afterward. The researchers suggest that nightmares serve as a kind of controlled rehearsal of fear, the brain practicing its own emotional regulation in the relative safety of sleep, even when the practice feels frightening. Not all difficult nights are wasted nights. The prefrontal cortex, the most evolutionarily recent part of your brain, is responsible for rational thought, impulse control, and emotional regulation. During most of REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex is partially deactivated, which is why dreams can feel so illogical, emotionally overwhelming, and free from the constraints of waking reason. But this deactivation is not entirely a flaw. Some researchers believe that the partial switching off of the prefrontal cortex during REM creates the conditions necessary for emotional memory processing. By reducing the analytical suppression that would otherwise prevent the brain from fully re-experiencing and recontextualizing difficult emotional content. Grief, one of the most complex and persistent emotional experiences humans navigate, responds meaningfully to sleep. Researchers studying bereavement have found that people who maintain healthy sleep patterns in the months after a significant loss show faster emotional adaptation and lower rates of complicated grief syndrome, a condition in which grief becomes disabling and non-resolving. The mechanism appears to involve the nightly REM processing of grief-related memories. which gradually reduces the acute pain associated with the loss while preserving the memories themselves. Sleep does not erase love or loss. It holds them gently while your brain learns to carry them differently. The body's physiological response to emotional trauma, elevated heart rate, muscle tension, heightened startle response, can persist long after the traumatic event if sleep is disrupted. Research using psychophysiological monitoring has shown that people who sleep poorly in the weeks following a traumatic experience are significantly more likely to develop persistent physical symptoms of stress, including elevated inflammatory markers and dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. Sleep, in the acute aftermath of trauma, appears to serve as a biological buffer, a period in which the nervous system can begin the slow work of returning to baseline. The nights immediately after a difficult experience matter profoundly. Your brain is not the only system involved in nighttime emotional recovery. The vagus nerve, a long, branching nerve that connects the brain to the heart, its lungs, and digestive system, plays a key role in the body's ability to shift between states of stress and calm. During sleep, vagal tone typically increases, supporting the parasympathetic nervous system and lowering the body's overall stress activation. Research using heart rate variability as a measure of vagal function has found that people with higher vagal tone during sleep show better emotional regulation and faster recovery from negative emotional experiences in waking life. The body's rest is inseparable from the mind's healing. Trauma stored in the body. The physical sensations of tension, bracing, and contraction that accompany unresolved emotional experience may also be processed during sleep. Research in somatic psychology suggests that during REM sleep, the body undergoes micro-movements and subtle twitches that may represent the nervous system replaying and completing interrupted stress responses. Though the evidence for this specific mechanism is still preliminary, the broader finding is well established. Sleep is a full-body healing process, not merely a mental one. The softening of physical tension that often accompanies deep sleep may be part of the same recovery system that processes emotional memory. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, plays a role in the emotional processing that occurs during sleep. Research has found that oxytocin modulates activity in the amygdala and hippocampus during sleep and may contribute to the way social memories involving connection, belonging, and relationship, are processed and integrated. People with higher baseline oxytocin levels tend to show more adaptive emotional responses to interpersonal stress. And some researchers have proposed that the warm, safe feelings, often described in positive dreams, may reflect oxytocin's activity during REM sleep. The brain not only processing hurt, but practicing the felt sense of being held and understood. The science of sleep and emotional healing is still young, but its central insight is already clear. Sleep is not passive. It is the most active healing state your nervous system knows. Every night, without any conscious effort on your part, your brain is doing the careful, patient work of metabolizing experience, separating what happened from how much it has to hurt, extracting lessons from pain without requiring you to remain in it. You don't have to earn this healing. You don't have to understand it. You only have to allow it. And allowing it, it turns out, is as simple as closing your eyes. You're still here with us. And that means everything. A gentle subscribe helps another sleepless mind find their way home. Let's take a breath together now, one sleepy soul at a time. Let's pause here and notice your body as you breathe out slowly. Appreciate each tiny cell inside. Trillions of organisms working in silence. Heart beating, lungs breathing, brain thinking. All without your command. Notice the gentle sensations on your skin, in your muscles, along your spine. You are a complete ecosystem, diverse, self-balancing. Now we continue. The concept of sleep to forget was proposed by Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist Francis Crick and mathematician Graham Mitchison in 1983. But modern research has significantly refined this idea. Sleep does not erase memories. It reorganizes them. What is removed during sleep is not memory content, but rather the parasitic associations that accumulate in neural networks during waking life. Unwanted connections between concepts, intrusive thoughts, and rumination patterns may be selectively pruned during sleep, while core memories are strengthened. This selective pruning is a form of mental housekeeping that, when functioning well, leaves the mind cleaner and more focused each morning. Chronic insomnia is strongly associated with rumination, the repetitive, circular thinking pattern in which painful memories and anxious thoughts are replayed without resolution. Research published in the journal Behavior Research and Therapy has found that rumination predicts insomnia more reliably than anxiety alone, and that insomnia, in turn, worsens rumination by preventing the nightly emotional processing that would otherwise reduce the emotional charge of ruminated material. This creates a feedback loop. Pain prevents sleep, and the absence of sleep keeps the pain fresh. Understanding this cycle is the first step toward breaking it. And one reason why sleep therapy is now a recognized component of trauma treatment. REM, sleep deprivation, has been shown to impair the recognition of subtle emotional cues in other people's facial expressions. In studies where participants were selectively deprived of REM sleep while maintaining overall sleep duration, they showed significantly decreased ability to accurately read emotions in faces, particularly for expressions of happiness and sadness. This finding suggests that sleep does not only process your own emotional memories, but also calibrates your ability to read and respond to the emotional states of others. Poor sleep quietly narrows your emotional world, making connection harder and isolation more likely. Rest restores the capacity to see each other. The role of the insular cortex in emotional processing during sleep has received increasing attention from researchers. The insula, a hidden fold of cortex buried deep between the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes, is involved in the awareness of bodily sensations and in the integration of physical and emotional experience. During REM sleep, insular activity correlates with the intensity of emotional dream content. Some researchers propose that the insula is where the body's physical residue of emotional experience, the gut sensation of grief, the chest tightness of fear, is integrated with narrative memory during dreams. Sleep may heal the body's version of a story as well as the mind's. Studies of people who have experienced childhood adversity have found that the quality of their REM sleep in adulthood predicts, to a meaningful degree, their resilience and emotional well-being in later life. More so than the adversity itself, individuals who maintain healthy, restorative REM sleep appear better able to metabolize the emotional legacy of early difficult experiences. This finding carries a quietly hopeful implication. The past does not have an unchangeable grip on the present. One of the variables that mediates long-term emotional outcomes is something accessible every single night. The body's capacity for healing is not a fixed quantity. It can be tended. Lucid dreaming, the state in which a dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming while remaining asleep, has been studied as a potential therapeutic tool for PTSD and recurring nightmares. In lucid dreams, the dreamer can sometimes influence the dream narrative, changing threatening scenarios or observing them from a position of greater safety. Research from the University of Bern found that lucid dreamers showed reduced nightmare frequency and distress when trained to use lucid dreaming techniques. The mechanism is thought to involve the partial reactivation of the prefrontal cortex during lucid REM sleep, allowing the dreamer to engage their rational capacities while the emotional processing of the dream continues. The emotional content of dreams tends to shift across the night in predictable ways. Early night dreams, which occur during shorter REM periods, tend to contain more familiar, recent material, residues of the previous day. Later night dreams, during longer REM periods, tend to pull from more distant emotional memories, sometimes surfacing material from years or decades past. This temporal reach of late-night REM is thought to reflect the brain's ongoing work of integrating new experiences with older emotional frameworks, connecting what is happening now with what has happened before, finding patterns of meaning that stretch across a lifetime. The sleeping brain is a patient historian. The default mode network, a set of brain regions that become active during rest, daydreaming, and self-referential thought, plays a central role in dreaming and emotional memory processing. Key regions of the default mode network include the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the angular gyrus. During REM sleep, activity in these regions closely resembles their activity during the waking state of mind wandering, suggesting that dreaming may be a structured form of internally directed thought, not random, but organized around the self-narrative. The stories your sleeping brain tells about you are part of the long, ongoing work of making sense of a life. The relationship between sleep and moral reasoning has been studied in contexts of emotional processing. Research has found that sleep facilitates what psychologists call moral elevation, the ability to take a wider perspective on personal transgressions, reduce self-blame, and move toward forgiveness of self and others. Participants in one study who slept between ethical dilemma tasks showed more nuanced and compassionate moral reasoning at follow-up than those who remained awake. The working hypothesis is that sleep's emotional processing function includes the softening of harsh self-judgment, that the mind, given enough quiet nights, naturally loosens its grip on the narratives that say you should have done better. The neuropeptide BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is a protein that supports the growth, survival, and maintenance of neurons. Levels of BDNF increase during sleep, particularly during deep, slow-wave sleep, and BDNF plays a key role in synaptic plasticity, the process by which neural connections are strengthened or pruned, because emotional memory reconsolidation involves the physical remodeling of synaptic connections in the amygdala and hippocampus. BDNF availability during sleep is directly relevant to the brain's capacity for emotional healing. Exercise increases BDNF, sleep increases. B, D, N, F. Both are the brain investing in its own capacity to grow past what has hurt it. Social support significantly influences the quality of emotional processing during sleep. Research published in Psychosomatic Medicine found that people who reported feeling emotionally supported in their waking lives showed more restorative REM sleep, higher parasympathetic activation during sleep, and faster emotional recovery from laboratory-induced stressors. The mechanism appears to involve oxytocin and its downstream effects on amygdala regulation. What this suggests, gently, is that healing does not happen only in isolation. The emotional safety of genuine connection during waking hours creates better conditions for the healing that occurs during sleep. We process the world better when we do not feel entirely alone in it. The therapeutic potential of sleep has led to the development of sleep-focused interventions for trauma, including imagery rehearsal therapy, which guides people to rewrite the narrative of recurring nightmares while awake and then sleep with the new version. Controlled trials have found that imagery rehearsal therapy reduces nightmare frequency, improves overall sleep quality, and decreases PTSD symptom severity. The approach works partly because it gives the brain a revised emotional script to process during sleep, one with less terror and more resolution. The sleep, it turns out, is responsive to the stories we tell it before we close our eyes. The timing of sleep after an emotional experience matters enormously. Research has consistently found that sleeping in the first 24 hours after a moderately stressful experience produces more rapid and complete emotional recovery than delaying sleep. The window appears to be especially significant in the immediate aftermath of difficult experiences, when the emotional memory is still in its most malleable, reconsolidatable state. This finding has influenced recommendations in crisis counseling, not to force immediate verbal processing of traumatic events, but to ensure that affected individuals have access to safe, supportive conditions for sleep as soon as possible. Sometimes the most therapeutic thing is simply a quiet room and the permission to rest. The basal ganglia, a group of subcortical structures involved in habit formation, reward processing, and procedural learning, also participate in the emotional processing that occurs during sleep. Research using neuroimaging during sleep has identified basal ganglia activation during REM sleep in response to emotionally charged memories, particularly memories involving interpersonal reward and rejection. This involvement suggests that sleep does not only process explicit emotional memories, the ones you consciously remember, but also the habitual emotional patterns that have become automatic, the reflexive ways your nervous system braces or reaches or withdraws in response to the world. Sleep may slowly reshape even your oldest emotional reflexes. There is evidence that emotional memory processing during sleep can transfer insights, moments of felt understanding about complex emotional situations, to waking awareness. People who go to sleep troubled by an interpersonal conflict sometimes wake with a new perspective, not because they consciously thought about the problem, but because the sleeping brain continued processing the emotional dimensions of the situation through the night. This is the neural basis of the common wisdom to sleep on a decision. The sleeping mind is not idle. It is working through implications and connections that the waking, rational mind has not yet assembled, finding a path through the emotional texture of a problem. You're still here with me. Thoughts still flickering like candlelight. Just notice. Don't judge. Just notice where your mind is. We're exploring consciousness itself, the very thing doing the exploring right now. Strange, beautiful, and perfectly calm. Let's drift onward together. Sleep spindles. Brief bursts of neural oscillation in the 12 to 15 Hz range, visible on EEG during non-REM sleep, have been identified as markers of emotional memory consolidation. Research has found that people who produce more sleep spindles show better overnight retention of emotionally relevant information and more complete emotional processing of stressful experiences. Sleep spindles occur primarily during stage 2 non-REM sleep, the transitional sleep stage that connects deeper slow-wave sleep with lighter sleep and REM. In a very real sense, every cycle of stage 2 sleep that produces spindles is a cycle of the brain, weaving emotional memory more securely into its long-term architecture. Emotional flashbacks, sudden intrusions of the felt sense of a past traumatic experience, without always having a clear visual memory, are thought to involve the amygdala and the body's stored physiological responses, rather than hippocampal narrative memory. Research suggests that these body-based intrusions may be particularly resistant to verbal, conscious processing, but highly responsive to sleep. During deep sleep, the body's physiological arousal patterns associated with past trauma appear to gradually desensitize, the nervous system learning, slowly, that the danger has passed. Sleep provides what waking thought sometimes cannot, a sustained, quiet period in which the body's alarm systems can begin to rest. The circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour biological clock, regulates not only the timing of sleep but also the timing of emotional reactivity. Research has found that emotional processing is most efficient when sleep occurs during the biological night, aligned with the natural circadian phase. Shift workers, people with irregular schedules, and those who sleep during the day and remain awake at night show disrupted emotional processing and elevated rates of mood disorders. The brain's healing capacity is not just about how much you sleep, but about when. The body has a preferred time for its emotional housekeeping, and it prefers the dark. Research published in the journal Cerebral Cortex found that the hippocampus and amygdala show elevated functional connectivity during REM sleep, meaning they are communicating more actively with each other during dreaming than during most waking states. This heightened connectivity is the neural signature of emotional memory reconsolidation. It represents the hippocampus, providing narrative context, the what and when and where of a memory, while the amygdala provides emotional context, the feeling of it. And the two systems collaboratively revise the emotional weight of the stored experience. The dream is not the point. The communication that generates it is. Emotional regulation during waking hours is significantly enhanced by sleep. Research using the cognitive reappraisal paradigm, a laboratory measure of how effectively people can reinterpret negative emotional stimuli in less distressing ways, has consistently found that well-rested individuals show greater capacity for cognitive reappraisal than sleep-deprived individuals. In practical terms, this means that the ability to catch yourself in a painful thought pattern and gently reframe it, one of the core skills of effective therapy, depends partly on having slept well the night before. The tools of emotional intelligence are sharpest after rest. A phenomenon called emotional memory enhancement refers to the finding that emotionally significant events are remembered more vividly and durably the neutral events. This is partly because the amygdala signals the hippocampus to encode emotionally charged events with extra fidelity. But sleep modifies this enhancement selectively. The emotional vividness of negative memories decreases more across sleep than the vividness of neutral or positive memories. This asymmetry, where sleep preferentially reduces the intensity of negative emotional memories while relatively preserving neutral and positive ones, appears to be an adaptive design feature, allowing the brain to learn from painful experiences without being permanently dominated by them. Research from the Salk Institute has found that newly formed memories, including emotional memories, undergo a period of cellular consolidation in the hours following encoding, during which they are vulnerable to modification. Sleep during this window deeply stabilizes the memory, but also provides the opportunity for emotional modification. This is why the sleep immediately following a traumatic or distressing event is thought to be so consequential. The memory is still wet, in a sense, still being shaped. Sleep during this period doesn't just stabilize what was experienced. It participates in determining what the memory will ultimately feel like to carry. The role of the thalamus in emotional sleep processing is often overlooked. The thalamus acts as the brain's central relay station, regulating the flow of information between the brainstem, limbic system, and cortex. During sleep, the thalamus enters a rhythmic, oscillating mode that generates the characteristic wave patterns of non-REM sleep. These oscillations coordinate the memory replay sequences that transfer emotional memories from hippocampal short-term storage to cortical long-term storage. When thalamic function is disrupted, as in some forms of sleep disorder, this relay process is interrupted, and emotional memories may remain stored in their original, high-charge form rather than being softened and integrated across the night. The gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication network between the intestinal microbiome and the central nervous system, plays an emerging role in sleep quality and emotional regulation. Research has found that gut microbiome composition influences neurotransmitter production, including serotonin, GABA, and dopamine, all of which affect both sleep architecture and emotional processing. Conversely, disrupted sleep alters the gut microbiome in ways that increase inflammatory signaling and reduce the production of calming neurotransmitters. The emerging picture is one of deep systemic interconnection. Sleep heals the gut, and the gut's health shapes the conditions in which sleep does its healing. The body is one continuous system of repair. At the midpoint of this journey, a quiet truth is worth resting with. The brain's capacity for emotional healing through sleep is not a modern discovery. It is an ancient, deeply conserved biological design. Evidence of REM sleep has been found in every mammal studied, and in birds and some reptiles. Across hundreds of millions of years of evolution, the pattern of nighttime emotional processing has been preserved. This means that what you do each night when you sleep is something your most distant ancestors did. Something whales and wolves and sparrows do. Something the natural world has been practicing long before anyone could name it. Healing through sleep is not a treatment. It is a birthright. Let each breath guide you to realize time is yours, a separate stream that only you are living. While your mind continues its quiet work, this second you're breathing, listening, is unique. Cherish the present moment, knowing that right now, your time is your own. and we continue drifting. Alexithymia, the difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotions, is associated with disrupted REM sleep and reduced emotional dream content. People with high alexithymia scores tend to report fewer emotionally vivid dreams and show less overnight emotional processing in laboratory studies. Some researchers believe that REM sleep and the dream process are part of how humans learn to recognize and name their own emotional states. That dreaming is practice in emotional literacy as much as it is practice in emotional processing. The sleeping brain is not only healing what has already been felt, it is building the capacity to feel more clearly. The phenomenon of emotional carryover, in which the emotional tone of a dream influences mood for hours after waking, reflects the incomplete integration of emotional dream content into waking awareness. Most emotional carryover from dreams dissipates within 30 to 60 minutes after waking, as the prefrontal cortex reactivates and reasserts its regulatory influence. But for people with PTSD, anxiety disorders, or severe insomnia, emotional carryover can persist throughout the day. Understanding this mechanism, that morning, emotional turbulence often reflects the unfinished work of the night before, can reduce the shame and confusion that often accompany waking in a state of unexplained distress. The emotional themes that appear most frequently in dreams across cultures are consistent falling, being chased, being unprepared, loss of teeth, flying, and reconnecting with people from the past. Cross-cultural dream research, including large-scale studies using dream diaries from participants in dozens of countries, has found notable consistency in these themes, despite vastly different waking life contexts. This universality suggests that the emotional content of dreams reflects species-level concerns rather than purely personal ones. That the sleeping brain is running programs shaped by millions of years of shared human experience, processing the archetypal fears and longings that belong to everyone. Alcohol significantly disrupts the brain's emotional processing during sleep. Though it is commonly used as a sleep aid, alcohol suppresses REM sleep, particularly during the first half of the night, which means that the emotional memory reconsolidation process is interrupted or delayed. People who drink before sleep often experience a rebound of intense, vivid, and emotionally distressing dreams in the second half of the night as REM pressure builds. Over time, chronic alcohol use before sleep degrades the brain's capacity for emotional regulation through sleep, which may partly explain the well-documented association between alcohol dependence and PTSD, depression, and emotional dysregulation. Some of the most durable emotional healing appears to happen across consecutive nights rather than within a single night. Longitudinal studies tracking emotional responses to negative stimuli over periods of days and weeks have found that each night of healthy sleep produces a small but measurable reduction in the emotional intensity of difficult memories. The cumulative effect across nights is substantial. Memories that felt overwhelming in the acute phase become, after sufficient nights of good sleep, manageable and integrated. This gradual, night-by-night process is not sudden or visible. It doesn't announce itself. But its quiet accumulation is one of the most profound gifts the body gives itself. The habenula is a small but influential brain structure that regulates the release of serotonin and dopamine in response to negative experiences. When the habenula detects that an expected reward has been withheld or that a punishment has occurred, It broadcasts an inhibitory signal across the brain, dampening motivation and generating the felt sense of failure or loss. Research in animal models has found that sleep, particularly REM sleep, modulates habenula activity in ways that reduce this inhibitory broadcast over time. This is one pathway through which sleep may protect against depression following loss or disappointment. The sleeping brain slowly turning down the signal of failure. Self-compassion, the practice of relating to oneself with the same kindness one might offer a friend in suffering, is associated with better sleep quality and more adaptive emotional processing. Research has found that people with higher trait self-compassion show less cortisol reactivity, faster recovery from negative events, and more restorative sleep following stressful experiences. The relationship between self-compassion and sleep may be bidirectional. Compassionate inner speech reduces the nighttime rumination that disrupts sleep, and better sleep reduces the emotional reactivity that makes self-compassion harder to access. Gentleness toward yourself is not only a moral stance, it is a physiological support for the brain's healing work. Music has been found to modulate the emotional content of dreams when played during sleep. Studies using soft, low arousal music during sleep have found that it influences dream themes toward more positive, less threatening content. The mechanism involves the brain's auditory processing remaining partially active during sleep, particularly during lighter sleep stages, and incorporating external auditory stimuli into the ongoing dream narrative. Some researchers have used this finding to explore whether targeted musical intervention during sleep might help people with PTSD shift the emotional tone of nightmares. The boundary between waking and sleeping is more permeable than it appears. The locus coeruleus, a small nucleus in the brainstem that is the brain's primary source of norepinephrine, is the structure most directly involved in the norepinephrine suppression that enables emotional memory processing during REM sleep. During REM, the locus coeruleus falls almost entirely silent, a profound and necessary quieting. In people with PTSD, the locus coeruleus does not fully quiet during REM, producing a state that is described as REM with elevated norepinephrine, in which traumatic memories are replayed without the chemical protection that would allow for painless processing. Research targeting the locus coeruleus with pharmacological intervention has shown early promise in reducing PTSD nightmare severity. There is a growing body of research linking physical exercise to improved emotional processing during sleep. Moderate aerobic exercise increases slow-wave deep sleep, promotes the release of BDNF, and reduces nighttime cortisol, all of which enhance the conditions for overnight emotional recovery. A 2023 meta-analysis found that people who exercise regularly show measurably better emotional regulation on days following exercise, with part of the effect mediated by improved sleep quality. The body does not separate its healing systems. Physical movement and mental rest are not separate categories of well-being. They are the same system, serving the same purpose. From different angles. Trauma passed between generations, known as intergenerational or transgenerational trauma, has been found to influence sleep, architecture, and emotional processing in the children and grandchildren of trauma survivors. Epigenetic research, including studies on Holocaust survivors and their descendants, has found measurable differences in stress hormone regulation, HPA axis sensitivity, and sleep patterns. These findings are still contested and complex. but they suggest that the body's relationship with sleep and emotional processing can be shaped not only by personal history, but also by the experiences of those who came before. The healing that sleep offers may extend across generations, one night at a time. The phenomenon of therapeutic dreaming, in which people spontaneously work through grief, loss, or interpersonal conflict within dream narratives, has been documented across cultures and throughout history. In many indigenous healing traditions, dreams are understood not as passive reflections of the unconscious, but as an active therapeutic space in which the spirit does necessary work. Contemporary sleep science has arrived, through a different route, at a remarkably similar conclusion: that the dream is not merely a byproduct of sleep, but a functional component of the brain's healing process. Ancient intuition and modern neuroscience meeting in the dark. The sleep architecture of infants and young children contains far more REM sleep than that of adults. Newborns spend approximately 50% of their sleep time in REM, compared to around 20% for adults. Developmental researchers propose that the high proportion of REM in early life reflects the enormous amount of emotional and social learning that gets processed during these years. Every interaction, every face, every emotional tone absorbed and integrated during those long, curling stretches of infant sleep. The brain of a sleeping child is not resting. It is building the emotional architecture of a person. Compassion for others who have experienced trauma can itself be processed and integrated during sleep. Research on moral and pro-social emotions, including empathy, compassion, and the vicarious distress of witnessing others' suffering, has found that these emotional states are subject to the same nightly processing cycles as personal memories. Watching someone you care about suffer leaves a trace in your nervous system. Sleep gives your brain the opportunity to hold that trace with care, to metabolize the weight of witnessing, to carry others' pain without being crushed by it. Care is heavy. Sleep is one way the body learns to bear it. Compassion fatigue, the emotional exhaustion that develops in caregivers, healthcare workers, and others who routinely absorb the distress of others, is strongly associated with REM sleep disruption. Research has found that people experiencing compassion fatigue show reduced REM sleep duration, altered theta wave activity during sleep, and impaired overnight emotional processing. The practical implication is that protecting sleep is not a personal luxury for caregivers. It is a functional requirement for the continued capacity to care. The ability to give empathy is a renewable resource, but it requires consistent, quality sleep for its renewal. Rest is not selfishness. It is maintenance. Sleep quality in the aftermath of relational rupture, the end of a significant relationship, a serious conflict, or a breach of trust, predicts the rate of emotional recovery. Research tracking individuals through relationship dissolution found that those who maintained better sleep quality showed faster reduction in attachment-related distress, more rapid reorganization of self-concept, and lower rates of depression in the months following the rupture. The sleeping brain, working through the emotional residue of lost connection, is doing something that no waking activity can fully replace. The nights after a heart has been broken are not wasted. They are part of how the heart heals. The capacity for positive emotion, joy, gratitude, wonder, affection, is also maintained and restored through sleep. Research has found that sleep deprivation reduces not only negative emotional reactivity, but also the ability to experience positive emotions. People who are chronically sleep deprived report reduced sensitivity to rewarding stimuli, decreased enjoyment of pleasurable activities, and flattened affective range. This finding matters because it means that sleep is not only healing what hurts, it is also tending the ground in which joy can grow. Adequate sleep does not make difficult lives easier, but it preserves the capacity to notice what is still good in them. The neurological signature of forgiveness, the reduction of anger, blame, and resentment toward those who have caused harm, has been studied in the context of sleep and emotional processing. Research has found that people who score higher on trait forgiveness show more complete overnight processing of anger-related memories, with greater reduction in amygdala reactivity to reminders of interpersonal offense. The relationship appears to be reciprocal. More forgiving people sleep better, and better sleep appears to support greater capacity for forgiveness. Neither sleep nor forgiveness is a simple act of will. Both are processes, gradual and biological, that the body accomplishes in the quiet of its own time. Anticipatory anxiety, the specific fear of what might happen in the future, is metabolized differently during sleep than fear associated with past events. Research using functional neuroimaging has found that sleep selectively reduces the emotional intensity of anticipatory fear responses to stimuli that, in laboratory conditions, turned out not to be threatening. The implication is that sleep helps calibrate the future threat detection system, not only processing what has already hurt, but adjusting the prediction of what might hurt next. Every morning, after a good night's sleep, the world looks slightly less frightening. This is not optimism. It is neuroscience. The timing of nightmares within the sleep cycle reflects their function. PTSD-related nightmares most commonly occur in the early portion of REM sleep, or at the REM non-REM boundary, times when emotional memory processing is most intense and the dream narrative most closely mirrors the original traumatic event. Nightmares that occur later in the night, in longer REM periods, tend to be more distorted, symbolic, and less directly traumatic in content, suggesting that the brain's processing work has progressed further. This gradient, from literal to symbolic, from raw to integrated, maps the arc of emotional healing that healthy sleep makes possible across a single night. Breathing practices that activate the vagus nerve. Slow, deep breathing with an extended exhale have been found to improve the quality of emotional processing during subsequent sleep. Research has found that slow breathing before bed increases parasympathetic tone, reduces pre-sleep cortisol, and improves REM sleep duration and quality. These findings have led to the integration of breath-focused practices into trauma-informed sleep interventions. The exhale, in particular, is the part of the breath associated with parasympathetic activation, the letting go that prepares the nervous system for the deeper letting go of sleep. Every long, slow out-breath is a small act of preparation for the night's healing. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to physically restructure itself in response to experience, is fundamentally dependent on sleep. The remodeling of synaptic connections that underlies emotional healing, habit change, and the integration of therapy is most active during sleep, when the brain has both the metabolic resources and the neural quiet needed for physical reconstruction, this means that the benefits of therapy, medication, and self-reflection are, to a significant degree, consolidated during sleep. The work done during waking hours creates the conditions for change. Sleep does the actual remodeling. Without adequate sleep, even the most sincere efforts at healing are working against the architecture they need. Hyperarousal, the state of persistent elevated alertness that characterizes PTSD and many anxiety disorders, directly interferes with the sleep onset process. Research has found that the neurological signature of hyperarousal includes elevated activity in the thalamus and sensory cortex, preventing the brain from downshifting into the slow, synchronized oscillations of early non-REM sleep. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The condition that most needs the healing of sleep is precisely the condition that makes sleep hardest to reach. Treatments for hyperarousal-related insomnia, including cognitive behavioral therapy and certain somatic practices, work partly by giving the nervous system a pathway back to the threshold of sleep. The idea that we are most vulnerable during sleep, unconscious, physically still, dependent on the safety of our environment, may be one reason that traumatic experience so often disrupts sleep. The nervous system, trained to remain vigilant by threat, resists the surrender that sleep requires. Research has found that creating conditions of felt safety, comfortable physical environment, absence of threat cues, the presence or proximity of trusted others, reliably improves sleep quality in trauma-affected populations. Safety is not only a psychological concept, it is a neurological prerequisite for the healing that sleep provides. The body heals when it feels safe enough to stop guarding. At this point in our journey, it is worth pausing to hold the central question once more. How does the brain process emotions while we dream? The answer, drawn from decades of careful research, is this through a beautifully orchestrated quieting of the chemicals of fear, a synchronized conversation between the memory and emotion centers of the brain, and the repeated, patient revisiting of difficult experience within the protected space of sleep. Sleep is not just rest. It is the most freely available, most deeply natural form of emotional therapy that exists. And that quiet mercy, waiting for you every night, is already yours. Almost done. Relax even deeper. You are a complete ecosystem. Heart beating, lungs breathing, neurons quietly weaving the story of this day into something softer. Feel the gentle rhythm of your breath. Inhale, exhale. A small cycle within the larger healing of the night. You don't need to hold on to anything. Let everything unfold. We'll continue with the final facts. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a luxury. And the brain will attempt to recover emotional processing debt just as it recovers sleep debt. After periods of inadequate sleep, the brain shows a rebound increase in REM sleep duration, prioritizing the emotional processing that was missed. This REM rebound can produce vivid, intense, and sometimes disturbing dreams as the brain works rapidly through a backlog of unprocessed emotional material. The body understands what it is owed. The prefrontal cortex requires approximately 16 hours of wakefulness before it begins to show measurable impairment in emotional regulation capacity. After 24 hours without sleep, impairment in emotional processing is comparable to significant clinical anxiety. The brain's emotional regulation system is among the first and most vulnerable of its capacities to degrade without adequate rest. The brain knows what it needs. A landmark study, published in Current Biology in 2011, found that after a night of total sleep deprivation, areas of the brain involved in emotional reactivity became hypersensitive to even mildly negative stimuli. The participants perceived neutral images as threatening. A night of sleep restored baseline function. The world looks different when you are rested. This is not a feeling. It is anatomy. Restorative sleep increases the production of interleukin-6, an anti-inflammatory cytokine, which plays a role in emotional resilience as well as physical recovery. Chronic inflammation, associated with sleep deprivation, is increasingly linked to depression and anxiety. Research has found that inflammatory markers elevated by poor sleep correlate directly with increased emotional reactivity and reduced capacity for positive emotion. Sleep is anti-inflammatory in both its physical and emotional effects, quietly calming the body's alarm systems from the inside. Dreams involving deceased loved ones, which are reported by the majority of bereaved individuals, are associated with positive grief outcomes when they occur in a context of healthy sleep. These dreams appear to allow continued emotional connection and gentle goodbye making. Many cultures have understood this intuitively. Sleep science now offers a neurological frame for what has always been felt. The sleeping brain preferentially replays emotionally significant episodes from the previous day during slow-wave sleep, a process confirmed by studies in which newly formed memories were cued during sleep with associated sounds. Emotional memories, tagged as significant, receive extra replay time. The brain returns, again and again, to what mattered most, holding it in the night until it is softer, until it can be carried without so much weight. Fear extinction. The process by which a feared stimulus gradually loses its ability to trigger fear responses is strongly consolidated during sleep. Research has found that sleep between exposure therapy sessions significantly improves the retention of fear extinction learning. The brain requires rest to anchor what the therapy has loosened. Therapy and sleep work together. Neither is sufficient without the other. Healing takes time, and time taken in rest counts. The sleeping brain continues to process language and meaning to a limited degree. Researchers have demonstrated that sleepers can respond appropriately to spoken yes or no questions during certain stages of non-REM sleep. The processing of emotionally significant words and phrases occurs during sleep as well, with the amygdala remaining selectively responsive to personally relevant emotional language, even during deep sleep. Polyvagal theory, a framework developed by Stephen Porges, though still considered debated within neuroscience, proposes that the autonomic nervous system has three states: social engagement, fight or flight, and freeze or shut down. Sleep is associated with the deepest parasympathetic regulation, a state in which the nervous system can safely complete processing that the other states could not allow. Whatever the final scientific consensus on the specific mechanisms, the broader point that rest enables a quality of healing unavailable during stress holds consistently across research traditions. Research on mindfulness meditation has found that experienced meditators show altered sleep architecture, including increased slow-wave sleep, enhanced sleep spindle activity, and more efficient REM sleep. The emotional regulation skills developed through meditation appear to support and deepen the brain's natural emotional processing during sleep. Practices that support presence and equanimity during waking life appear to create better conditions for healing during sleep. Grief after pregnancy loss is associated with particularly severe sleep disruption, and research has found that sleep-focused interventions in this population can significantly reduce the duration and intensity of complicated grief. The body's healing work after loss depends on the access to adequate sleep, and that access is not always available. Knowing this can inform the care offered to those who are grieving. The brain's reward system, including the nucleus accumbens and the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, is recalibrated during sleep. Sleep normalizes dopamine sensitivity, preventing both the blunting of reward response associated with depression and the heightened craving associated with addiction. A rested brain finds ordinary pleasures pleasurable again. The small moments, a warm cup, a familiar voice, morning light, return to their proper weight. Research on expressive writing, the therapeutic practice of writing about difficult emotional experiences, has found that its benefits are most pronounced when followed by a night of healthy sleep. The writing appears to prime the emotional material for nocturnal processing. The sleep does the actual integration. Expression and rest are partners in the healing process. One gives the emotion a shape, the other gives the shape somewhere to settle. Emotional resilience, the capacity to recover effectively from adversity, is not a fixed trait. It is a dynamic capacity that fluctuates with sleep quality. Research tracking emotional resilience measures over weeks and months has found that sleep quality is one of the strongest predictors of day-to-day resilience variation. This means resilience can be tended. One very significant way to tend it is simply to sleep. The brain's capacity for empathy, the ability to accurately model and resonate with another person's emotional state, is degraded by sleep deprivation and restored by adequate sleep. Research using neuroimaging has found that well-rested brains show stronger activation of the mirror neuron system and the affective empathy network when viewing others in distress. Sleep does not only heal your own emotional wounds, it restores your capacity to be present for the wounds of others. In the hours just before natural waking, during the longest and most emotionally rich REM period of the night, the brain often produces dreams that feel particularly meaningful, vivid, and emotionally resolved. These late-morning REM dreams may represent the final stage of a night's emotional processing. The brain's completed work, surfaced to the threshold of consciousness before the day begins. The feeling of waking with unexpected peace after a difficult night may reflect exactly this. The olfactory system, the sense of smell, has a more direct pathway to the amygdala and hippocampus than any other sense. This is why smells associated with emotionally significant experiences can trigger powerful, involuntary emotional memories. During sleep, the olfactory cortex maintains some activity, and research suggests that familiar, comforting scents in the sleep environment may support a sense of safety and reduce nocturnal anxiety, gently supporting the conditions in which emotional processing can proceed. The experience of awe, the feeling of encountering something vast, mysterious, or transcendent, has been found to reduce self-focused rumination and broaden emotional perspective. Research has found that people who regularly experience awe show improved sleep quality and more adaptive emotional regulation. The two appear to share a common mechanism. Both involve a reduction in the relentless self-monitoring that consumes mental energy and disrupts rest. Ow reminds the nervous system that it is small in the best possible way. Chronic pain, which significantly disrupts sleep architecture, is both a cause and an effect of poor emotional processing. Pain activates the same brain regions as emotional distress, and the two systems are deeply intertwined. Sleep deprivation lowers pain thresholds, creating a vicious cycle in which pain prevents sleep and poor sleep amplifies pain. Interventions that improve sleep quality have been found to reduce both perceived pain intensity and the emotional distress associated with chronic pain conditions. The healing is indivisible. Writing down your worries before bed, a practice sometimes called a worry spillway, has been found in controlled studies to reduce pre-sleep cognitive arousal and improve sleep onset. By externalizing anxious thoughts from the mind onto paper, the brain appears to release some of its self-imposed obligation to hold them vigilantly. The unfinished business of the day, placed on paper, is perceived by the nervous system as somewhat less pressing. The mind, given permission to set something down, sleeps more easily. Hope has a measurable neurological correlate, the activation of the ventral striatum and the anterior cingulate cortex in response to positive, future-oriented imagining. Research has found that these same regions are active during certain types of positive dreaming, and that people who report more hopeful waking cognition also report more emotionally positive dream content. The relationship between what you believe is possible and what your sleeping brain rehearses is not merely metaphorical. Hope appears to shape the architecture of the healing night. The transition from deep delta sleep to lighter natural waking is associated with a gradual reactivation of the prefrontal cortex and a consolidation of the night's emotional processing. This is why the quality of that transition matters. The softness or harshness of the alarm, the first sounds and light encountered, the first thoughts allowed. The emotional tone of waking can preserve or disturb the settled state that a healing night has quietly worked toward. Meaning-making, the human drive to find significance and purpose in experience, including painful experience, is supported by the dreaming process. Research on the narrative structure of dreams has found that the sleeping brain naturally organizes emotional experience into story form, creating temporal arcs, causal sequences, and resolution scenes that parallel the structure of the meaning-making process during waking life. The sleeping mind is, among other things, a storyteller, working through the night to find the sentence that makes sense of what the day contained. The quality of sleep in the year following a major life stressor, bereavement, illness, relationship loss, is one of the most powerful predictors of long-term psychological adjustment. Those who protect their sleep, even imperfectly, show significantly better outcomes compared to those whose sleep remains chronically disrupted. The commitment to sleep, in the midst of hardship, is itself a form of resilience. The body insisting on its own healing even when the world feels unsafe. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, the healing has already begun. The chemicals of fear are quieting. The memory centers of your brain are finding their rhythm. The stories of your day are being gently released of their sharpest edges. Sleep is not just rest. It is the most natural therapy available, reducing the intensity of painful memories. Night after patient night, close your eyes and trust that your sleeping mind already knows the way home. And so, our quiet journey through the science of sleep and emotional healing comes to a gentle close. We've traveled from the chemistry of fear dissolving in the dark to the brain's patient editing of painful memory, discovering that healing does not require effort, only time, and the permission to rest, from the silent firing of neurons weaving new emotional meaning, to the night where even grief grows softer. We've glimpsed how sleep is both biology and grace, something the body offers itself every night, without condition. Sleep reminds us that the deepest healing happens in silence, in the dark, in the hours between one day and the next. Without this nightly mercy, every wound would stay raw. By pausing to rest, we discover that the body already knows the way. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about consciousness itself, yours, mine, everyone listening, all awareness everywhere, perhaps all connected in ways we don't yet understand. You are not alone in the universe of minds. Let your entire being dissolve into the ocean of consciousness, into dreamless rest, into the space before thought. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left, only peace. Perhaps this thoughtful exploration of the mind's quiet healing brought you relaxation, rest, or a softer place to land tonight. A gentle like and subscribe helps other sleepless souls discover this peaceful space too. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now, nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most journeys take you. You can allow these thoughts of sleep and healing to fade now, like the last light at the edge of a dream, leaving only the warm, quiet calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if the earth itself is holding you gently, the way it has always held everything that needed to rest. If sleep comes, let it carry you like water carrying a leaf downstream, smoothly, inevitably, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the brain will keep its quiet work. The long, patient chemistry of healing will still be there. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, dear one, and remember, every night you sleep, you are giving your mind the only gift it asks for. Good night.